biggest part of our tax burden, and of course it's our children we're concerned with. So this is the second step in part of a three-step process we did. Back before the legislative session, we had Stuart Snow from the Cy-Fair ISD, he's Chief Financial Officer. He came over and went through and tried to explain the complex system, the way Texas funds the school systems. And it's, I've sat through that probably 5 times, and I catch glimmers of light every once in a while how it all connects together. But the main thing is it's incredibly complicated and probably not the best system we could have in Texas, even though House Bill 3 in the last session did make it somewhat better in some areas, but then they threw a bunch of other junk in there. I think most of the legislatures didn't even know were in there. And they being the bureaucracy in Austin. So anyway, the next step on that was just follow Gary's question here. Why do we have this Harris County school board? And then we have all kinds of people in Austin appointed, hired, contracted, and all that have their finger in the education pie, and probably even worse so than the money is an influencer. So today, Colleen Vera is a teacher. She's done a little presentation on this, and then I sat down with her for a couple hours, and we had a good time asking a lot of questions, and I could see by her flow chart it's a lot bigger than her prior presentation. And then we'll have our own Linda here, who's been active in homeschooling, to tell people about the homeschooling and what's available and what the options are and what a family needs to consider and things like that, and the support behind it. So we'll start with Colleen first, and then we'll have a few questions after that. And then we've got teachers here, we've got former school board members, and we have school board members, and we have a lot of informed people here to discuss this.
Thank you. Can y'all hear me back there? No problem? Okay. I'm a retired teacher, so I think I can talk pretty loud. I'm Colleen Vera, and I'm married to Alan Vera. Most people know him as the election guy. But I'm a retired teacher, and when I hear people start talking about how they want to fix the schools, the biggest problem they have is they don't understand the system. It's not like it used to be. It's not like when we went to school. Just because you went to school in the 1960s doesn't mean you understand what schools are like today. So I'm going to give you a really fast summary from a teacher's perspective to kind of open your eyes a little bit about education, because I know you guys want to get involved and try to get involved in some kind of project to help fix something. And I suggest you zero in on one section. You can't fix the whole thing. And so to zero in on something that you find really important, that you have enough passion and drive for, so that maybe you can make an impact. I'm not politically correct, and this presentation is made from my own experience and my own opinions. I don't work for any government entity anymore, so I can say whatever I please, but I don't represent anyone but myself. First of all, you have to understand the history. When Texas decided to become a state, we wanted public free schools. When we broke away from Mexico, they didn't have a good school system, and that's what Texans wanted. So they put it in the Constitution, and they made the legislature responsible. But when the legislature started, they didn't have any money. So they gave each county land, and that was county school land. The counties could sell that land to make money to actually run their schools for a while. So we had little bitty schools. We elected a county school board, and they were responsible. The board members actually worked. They made sure the buildings were maintained. They ordered the textbooks. They got paid $6 a month for their big job. And then the superintendent was actually the person that hired and fired the teachers and took care of the day-to-day operations. They also had a really big job as the superintendent had to count how many kids were in the county and do a census every year, and then divide what state money they got according to how many kids were in each school. And if the child was handicapped at that time, they didn't go to school. So they actually had to go and take out the names of the kids who went to private school, that were homeschooled, or were not qualified to go to public schools. So they had a big job to do at that time, and in a county the size of Harris, that was quite a census. They had like 20 helpers who worked all year long just counting the kids, because they had to go from farm to farm. Then in about 1915, if you can imagine, if the high school was what's now HISD, and you lived in Cyfair and your kid had to travel to what's now HISD in 1916 to go to high school, you probably weren't real happy with the school system. So even though it was only a few months long, most people were very unhappy that lived in the rural areas. They didn't feel that they were getting what the people closer to the city got. So they went to the legislature and they said, we don't like the county system. We want to be independent. So the state legislature said, if you have 500 students and a tax base, you can become an independent school district, independent from the county. So it started about 1915, and Cyfair, which most people out here would attend, in 1939, Cyfair, after consolidating a couple of times, became independent and broke away from the county. They collected their own little property tax. They ran their own schools, had their own superintendent, elected their own school board, and the county no longer had any authority over them. By 1966, Harris County had all of their students in independent school districts. In every other county in Texas, when they all went independent, they closed their county school board. I mean, you don't need them anymore. They don't have any students. Well, Harris and Dallas County didn't close. Dallas is now closed because they went to prison, but that they kind of got in a little bit of trouble there. But for 53 years, Harris County, we still elect a county school board. They still collect a school property tax, but they don't have any students, and that's what Kay has gone to try to help kind of clean up. In 1967, our legislature went kind of the way of LBJ's Great Society. LBJ's idea is the schools are going to fix everything, right? We're going to do Head Start. We're going to give them free lunch. We're going to do all this stuff to fix society's ills through our schools. And so the state of Texas started what we call educational service centers. And they're an extra educational bureaucracy that is designed as support for the school districts. They assist the schools to supposedly improve their efficiency and how well they educate kids. Of course, none of that has improved since 1967, but we have 20 of them across the state of Texas. Right now, the largest one is Region 4. The director used to be a superintendent or associate superintendent for Cyfair. Her salary with her benefits and all that kind of stuff is almost $500,000 a year. They employ about 5,000 people across the state and about $220 million in salaries for these people. And we're responsible for them through teacher retirement system for the rest of their lives. And it's just an extra bureaucracy in the education system. But it's one of those places where if you're a school administrator and you're kind of sick of the kids, you can go to the ESC and work and pad your salary so that when you retire, you get this extra little benefits. Everybody knows how the system works, but they're very well protected because, you know, TAS and TASB support them. What I did is I made you a chart because when we started in the 1890s, it was basically a little local control and your county was in charge and the state kind of sent you some money. Now it's this giant conglomeration of whatever it is. Everybody's hand is in the pie of education, starting with the federal government and going on down. We are the only county now that has a county school board and collects a school property tax. So I have that one in orange, but the rest of the state is dealing with everything else. If you notice, the teachers and the students, they're at the very end of the line. And it always makes me mad that everybody's always mad at the teacher. It's always the teachers need more training. The teachers need this. The teachers are indoctrinating our kids. Well, if you look at everybody who's involved, the board teacher doesn't have a say in pretty much anything anymore. And they're the ones that everybody's always threatening to sue. But elections are the ones that have the consequences for our education system. From when we elect our federal representatives, our president, down to our state representatives, and your local school board. and all of the judges. Nowadays, the judges get their hands at the schools. The parents go and they sue somebody, and now the judge says the school has to do this. It's gotten totally nuts to where the teachers pretty much have to buy insurance because you got to protect yourself from being sued by everybody. And most of it is run by people who have no idea what's going on in the schools. Most of our legislators couldn't pass the tests that are given to the kids nowadays, but they're requiring the kids to take it. It has become a totally insane system, pretty much based on money. Do I go too far?
Nope.
There goes. The federal government has way too much power and authority in our education system. And I challenge anyone to look at the Constitution of the United States and find education mentioned in there. I've read it a bunch of times and I can't find it. There is no room for, and there's no place mentioned in the Constitution for the federal government to even be involved in schools. But what they've done, just like they put their hands in everything else, they use national defense and social responsibility as their excuse. And notice how whenever they want to get involved in schools, they call it a national crisis. And so they have to do something. They got to throw money into it and get the federal government involved. It started in the 1860s with land grants for agricultural colleges because they needed, we were an agricultural society. People needed to understand how to work the land. So the federal government felt that they had the authority to offer those land grants for the colleges. Then in the 20s, they had grants for agriculture and home economics so that people would learn how to be self-supported. I was a home economics teacher, so I liked that grant. But everything was fine until it was when Clinton was president, he changed those definitions. And so the money that came through for home economics, it didn't come through anymore because you had to be a paying job, and being a housewife and a mother is not a paying job. So that's when all of the home economics changed to culinary arts and things like that. They were actually paid occupations. We didn't train people to have to be self-sufficient at home anymore. In 1940s, after people come back from the war, it was grants and stuff to train our veterans. And then in 45, they started the National Free Lunch Program, which most people thought started with LBJ, but LBJ was the one that really attached it to regulations. It was actually to use up our agricultural subsidies because they were trying to promote the farmers. But now the newest excuse you'll see every time is that they're going to use the schools to fix some kind of society problem. Anti-bullying, whatever it is we're not happy with, we're going to throw money at it into our schools. And whenever they do that, the schools have to hire more bureaucrats to run the program. And then they come and tell the teachers what to do. So the teacher who's supposed to be teaching math is now supposed to somehow incorporate anti-bullying into her math lesson, but then she's also supposed to be doing character education because there's extra money coming in from the state on character education, and then some extra vocabulary and reading improvement she's supposed to be doing. It just becomes totally nuts when you're trying to teach math, but if you don't get these other things in, you're not going to get your stipend at the end of the year, so you throw the other things in there, and math becomes secondary. In 1954, was the Brown versus the Board of Education, which started the desegregation of our schools, which those people could argue was bad, but it started from the federal government. Then in 1958, because of the race to the moon and all that kind of stuff, the Soviet launch of Sputnik, we started new math, and that spread through the United States under the national defense. We had to increase our math so that we could beat out the Soviets. It went into 1964 with civil rights. 65 was the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, where you had to start doing certain things in order to qualify for federal money. 74 started the Disability Act. 79 was when we started the Department of Education. Most people assume we've always had a federal Department of Education, but it wasn't. It was Jimmy Carter who started that. That's about when I started teaching, and so I started before that time, and we really saw the change. I was not politically active. I was raised in a Republican household, and I usually voted in the general election, but I wasn't really active on anything, and I did not understand the changes that we were seeing. And at first, Texas was really in charge, and we had great programs, and when the federal government started getting involved, we couldn't figure out why they were messing it all up. But now I get it. It was all about federal money, when Texas was doing a great job on her own, and we saw the mess, but as teachers, we didn't really get what was going on. 1997, really saw that one. That was when mainstreaming came about. And if you're not in education, you don't understand it, but it was mainstreaming, taking people with all sorts of special needs and putting them into regular mainstream classrooms, which sounds great until you're the teacher trying to figure out how to be a specialist in every kind of handicapping condition and trying to make everybody be happy and get along, and you've got 45 minutes a day to teach your lesson for your kids to pass their tests, but you've got to deal with all the other insanity at the same time. And it sounds great, but try doing it. Try in your office having people with all of these different disabilities, and you still got to get your work done if you're going to get paid. It's really hard to do in a limited time environment. The Republicans have not been any more helpful. They did things like No Child Left Behind, Race to the Top. It's basically just a bunch of new names for the federal government putting limits on the schools and saying you must do it this way in order to get the money. So anybody who's running for Congress, I would hope that your goal to get there is to get the federal government out of our schools. Now they still use that term national crisis, but they're doing things like national curriculum. We need to have it even across the United States, and that's where Common Core came from, is we're all going to be the same. Basically, they can control everybody that way, which is really scary. Universal pre-K, which is really sad that Texas started going that way. The teachers' unions want it because if from when you're 3 and 4 years old, you're through the education system, then we have to take all those teachers and train them, and they're all going to pay union dues, and now the unions get more power. Community schools is really a term for the school becomes the center of your life. You get your medical care there. They take care of you from 6 in the morning till 6 at night. You probably heard in the news lately, some people are talking about school needs to go until 6 at night. That's so that they become the daycare center. So the school becomes the center. Instead of the church being the center of the community, the school becomes the center of the community. And you don't need the parents anymore because the school's taking care of everything for you. Obamacare also brought in school clinics. So the kids don't have to go get a doctor's appointment after school. The parents don't have to get off work. If they're pregnant or need something, they've got a school clinic right there. Isn't that nice and convenient for the parents? So from my perspective as a teacher, the federal government has really messed up our schools. One of the biggest things they ever did was dumbing down the schools, because the teacher has to teach to the lowest to prevent lawsuits. You've got to look at your classroom and look at who's going to sue you, and you've got to figure out how to make sure that family's happy, because the other kid that's quiet over in the corner, well, he's not going to cause you problems. So you go ahead and concentrate on the kid that screams the loudest and has the lawyers. It also expects those teachers and those school districts to be a specialist in every problem that kid might have. And it's not possible. It's like going to a restaurant expecting them to cook anything. It doesn't work that way. Different restaurants do different things. Every school cannot be perfect at every disability and every interest that every human being has. It's just not possible. The most recent things is teaching to the test. That's because the money is attached to some kind of testing. And so if you don't teach to the test and your kids don't do well on the test, you don't get your bonus, or the school doesn't get some bonus. So all the principals care about is the test scores and whatever their rating is. So it's become a system of how do we get the money, and it's not worrying about those kids that aren't causing problems, it's worrying about the kids that are causing the problems so that they don't hurt our scores in any way. Community schools, like I said, is where it becomes a center of life. What they do is they push money from the federal government to Texas Education Agency to distribute as grants, and they're called community school grants, and it's things to push 24/7 attachment to the schools. So they call it after-school care or whatever, and it's all for enrichment. No, it's for the federal government to get the kids away from the parents and for them to be controlling the kids' day. Universal pre-K is another one, and one of the big things you might have heard about lately is restorative justice. Oh my goodness. It sounds really good on paper, but basically what it is, it's but the kid causes a problem, instead of you just getting to kick him out or suspend him from school or whatever, you're supposed to fix the problem, you know? So you're going to have this counsel with the kid, and you're going to explain to him what the issues are, and he's going to get to talk to the person that he harmed, and then we're going to work as a community to help that child. Oh my goodness, now we're supposed to fix his problem too. Well, the problem is he's keeping me from teaching the other kids. I don't have time to fix him, you know, but now we're supposed to fix all the problems. So again, the school's responsible for fixing the kid instead of the kid accepting the consequences of his actions. And one thing the federal government did, especially under Obama, is they increased the Office of Civil Rights, which means lawyers. So now you've got your tax dollars paying the federal government to hire lawyers to sue the school district where your local taxes are paying for it, because if they're not doing what the federal government wants, you've got to pay for the lawyers on both sides to go fight for whatever it is. And the teachers just shake their heads. You're going, this is nuts. Why are we putting the money into the classroom and buying some new thing that would be great for the kids? Instead, we're spending our money on lawyers. And all of this was supposed to increase education. But if you look at SAT scores going back to 1972, you notice nowadays we're lower than we were back then. And we were actually doing pretty well for a while. Until 1996, what they did to up it, they changed the test, so they changed the way it was scored. So, you know, if you're ever having trouble, let's go ahead and just cheat. Also, if you notice, there's a lot of schools now, colleges and universities saying, we're not going to take the SAT anymore, so they can justify taking the kids who aren't even qualified to be there. But one thing you have to be careful when you look at SAT scores is not every state is the same. You look at somebody like Minnesota and they talk about how great their test scores are. Well, I think it's less than 5% of the students there even take it. It's the cream of the crop that takes the test. In Texas, it's over 60% that take the test. We even give the PSAT like to 8th graders. So we're including a lot of people. So when our scores are lower, we're even testing those kids that don't even have English as their first language. So we're taking a giant pool of kids and giving all of them an opportunity. So our scores are always going to be lower than everybody else's. So it's not apples to apples. You got to really be careful. They really twist it a lot when they talk about test scores. I wanted to show you, this is what the teacher in 2019, what her seating chart looks like. When we were in school, your teacher might have put you in order by alphabet. They might have put boys on one side, girls on the other, whatever it was. You can't do that anymore. Nowadays, you have to do your seating chart in some way that makes sense to you, but usually it's by the kid's issue. GT means gifted and talented. I know it sounds terrible. We take those GT kids and you put them where they're useful to the teacher. They don't cause problems. They do their homework. They can read and write English. So you put them where the teacher needs help. And it's not really fair to the GT kids, but that's how it happens. By law, some kids get extra time to do their work. They might have 1 day, they might have 2 days, they might have 3 days, whatever their committee decides. So you can't collect the work the next day and grade it and give it back, because some kids have 3 days to turn it in. You also have some kids who don't speak English. So if you've got those kids, you have to figure out, okay, I have to make sure there's somebody to help them. I might have a gifted and talented kid that speaks their language, so I'm going to sit that kid over there who might be able to help them keep up with what we're doing in class. And remember, this class is only maybe 47 minutes, so you've got to get all this done really quick, because these kids are going to leave, and you're going to get 6 more groups all day long, and you've got to organize it and stay happy and be just so positive to everybody and never have any problems. Also, there are some kids by law only have to do 60 or 80% of the work to get an A. Now think if you're a welding teacher, what 40% of safety does that kid not have to know? It's really interesting, you know, when you're sitting there trying to make these decisions. It's all because the federal government makes all of these rules if you want to get your money. And then there's a section of the law called 504, where the kid might want preferential seating, or some extra issue. Maybe he can leave the classroom whenever he needs to because he gets stressed out, whatever it is. So usually it's a seating issue, so we always put them up in front because that way if an inspector comes through, you're going to get your points. You also might have a kid who's very low level Down syndrome. And some kids are very high functioning, they can keep up. Some kids aren't, but by law, maybe all he has to do is color a picture related to your topic in order to get credit for that day. So you usually have him in a place around a gifted and talented student where he doesn't get a lot of distractions. Then you might have a kid with autism that noises bother him, so you have to be able to have him by a door where he can go outside at any time if he starts to get distracted. Then you have maybe a kid, you got to remember their time schedules because the kid in the upper left-hand corner has to go to her clinic appointment at 9:35. If she misses that, then you're in trouble. So you've got to set a little timer to make sure while you're busy with other stuff you don't forget. At 9:40, you've got to send this other kid to group counseling for his drug addiction. And then at 9:45, you've got to send this kid to his restorative justice hearing. And then you've got to remember that today, the kid in the corner over there, his lawyer is going to come and escort him through his classes because his parents feel that he's being mistreated at school. So you got to do a little reminder so you have a seat over there for his lawyer. I mean, this is period one. And so people are always mad at the teachers. It's become nuts for these poor teachers. Please don't get mad at them. They really don't have time to indoctrinate your kids. They're just trying to get to period 2 without killing somebody. And then if this kid acts up, they've got to go explain what they did wrong to make the kid act up. It's just really nuts. Oops, do it again. The federal government has all this control, and yet they're only 11% of our funding in the state of Texas. Yet we're told we always need more money to fix everything, and we need that money to give up our local control in order to be successful. Teachers are still shaking their heads about that one. We also, what the federal government does is they give a grant, like communities and schools, they give that to each state, and then the state distributes it. And so as soon as that money is available, all the school districts go, oh look, we could get $2 million. So let's start this program. We'll get $2 million extra dollars, and it's whatever that policy is that the federal government wants pushed. So if they're just doing it with money, and people just keep grabbing for it, and their excuse is, look, we can get more money. Well, we don't want that here. But it doesn't matter, we'll get $2 million. And so the school districts fall for it all the time, and a lot of our elected leaders do that. Then another thing they do is they do the fads, like restorative justice. Some of you might remember in 1970s, it was the open concept school. They built a lot of junior high open concept. Now anybody with any brain knows you don't take a whole bunch of 6th and 7th graders, put them in one room together, and think they're going to concentrate. Doesn't work. You even put a window and you can't get a 6th grader to pay attention to you. So they spent all this money from the federal government, and then 5 years later, the architects all made a whole bunch more money because now they had to close up all the schools and build in walls. It was so stupid. All the teachers were shaking our heads going, what are they doing? Some guy in Harvard, had this brilliant idea, and it just cost us a whole bunch of money. They train the teachers really fast by the Department of Education as, $100 million or whatever. They get some guy that's from Harvard that wrote some book, and then they give the book for free to anybody who takes this course, and they send the money through the states, and then the states say, look, we get to go to free in-service, and everybody gets free books. And so they send the teachers these free in-services, paid for with your federal tax money, and everybody gets a free book and reads it, and then all of a sudden, within 6 months, all the teachers are doing whatever the thing is that the federal government wanted done. So it's all done with money, and it's all these little freebies, and it's really interesting to watch how it works. Lately, the federal government in the last 10 years has been relating everything to testing. That's why you see more and more testing and testing and testing. It's supposed to prove that the kids are learning, and all it really proves is the teachers have to teach the test for the teacher to get paid. So really, to me, the most unnecessary thing we have in education is the federal government. If we took that out, we'd be where Texas was supposed to be in the first place. And that was the Texas Constitution, which put Texas in charge of schools and our legislature in charge of the funding. We also have, the funding is the permanent school fund, and we just did a new amendment about that one. Today the fund is worth over $44 billion, and they don't, of course, they don't use that much money every year because we wouldn't have a fund left. But one of the scary things is it's used to back all the bond debt, including the charter school bond debt. So right now that bond debt's at $79 billion. So if we don't pay our local property taxes, then the permanent school fund would be paying for those bonds. So of course we've got to keep paying our taxes to pay for all those bonds. But it's really scary that we've gotten more and more into debt because don't worry, we have this fund to pay it in case we can't afford it. But the Texas government, who's in charge of our education system, again, we've got judges who can overrule everybody. But the legislature is the one who's passing all these laws, and that's what the Constitution says they're supposed to be doing. Our State Board of Education is another elected body, and I personally want to keep it that way. I've dealt with the legislators. They have no clue what they're doing. They should not be making the curriculum decisions and all that. They don't have time, and they are too pressured by the people who donate money to them. The State Board of Education is responsible for those standards, and that's a great place for people to go and get involved and testify and get involved in the area that you're really interested in, because the tests and everything are made from that curriculum, and if that curriculum is good and strong, then Texas stays good and strong. If we let it get corrupted, then it's going to be corrupted like some of the other states. Texas Education Agency, people always ask me, do we even need that thing? We do need that thing. It's not necessarily always right, but it's the little government entity that actually forces the schools to do what they're supposed to do on a day-to-day basis. They have to have somebody to report to. And especially if our legislature only meets every other year, there's got to be somebody that's enforcing the rules. And like when we have something like Harvey and a school district can't have classes, there's got to be somebody that allows them to say, okay, we'll waive that week for you and you'll still get your state money to pay your teachers and all that kind of stuff. So there has to be somebody who has the authority to make decisions when the legislature is not in session, and somebody that knows a little bit more than our legislature does about what's really going on. They also do a lot of the little grunt work on grants and things like that. Our governor appoints the Commissioner of Education that oversees that entity. And I know you hear a lot of commercials right now about how terrible they are for taking over HISD. It's not a permanent takeover. I've only been in a couple of places where there's been a takeover over my last 30-something years. It's always been necessary, the places that I worked, especially when one time I worked in a place where the state sent the high school students to the school I was at because their school was so low performing. Oh my goodness, it was a shock how low performing some kids could be. They hadn't even had textbooks in 2 years. We were like, what do you mean? How do you not have textbooks, you know? It was really shocking. There are some places that are that messed up. If the state takes it over, they're gonna appoint their own board, and then over a period of time, the voters will go back to electing another HISD board. It's not a permanent thing. It's a temporary thing to fix what the problems are, and then have new elections because they're not able to fix themselves. Another thing people forget about is the Ag Commissioner. They control the free and reduced lunch money that comes in from the federal government. When we were under Susan Combs, I didn't really know what a liberal was at that time, or a rhino, but after I met her, I found out what one was. She was the one that put all of those restrictions on birthday cakes and everything else. If you had a kid in school and all of a sudden there was this restriction on their birthday cakes, that all came from the Susan Combs era. Once she left and we have our new Commissioner of Education, the first thing he did was he did a reprieve on fryers, so we can have fryers in public schools again, foods that the kids like to eat. But the free and reduced lunch people even control the vending machines in your schools and all that kind of stuff. The federal government has reached that far nowadays by saying, we'll take away your free and reduced lunch money if you don't do what we say with your vending machines. It's totally crazy. The money is the big driver of all this. And all of you know that 35% of our state funds go into education. So it's a dog-eat-dog world. Everybody wants a piece of that pie, and they're willing to sell their mother's soul for some of that money. They don't care. And it's not about the kids anymore, it's about who's going to get control of that money. 90 million of that is just for the state testing program. And so when we say, let's just get rid of state testing, we get all these people fighting for that money. They're going to fight against the testing, getting rid of testing, because they're going to make a bunch of money off of that testing. The teachers have to teach the test in order for the teacher to get a decent evaluation. The test is tied to the school rankings, so the principals have to push it, and the superintendents have to push it, because that's how they're ranked, and their success is based on how their school district is ranked. And now they want to tie it to teacher evaluations. Well, think about it, if you're willing to go into a school that's low performing, and let's say you're a third grade teacher, and only 60% of your class passed their test the last year, you're not going to go and stay in there. If you're going to be judged by what percentage of your students passed the test, you're not going to go and take on a class where only 60% passed last year. You're going to go over to some high-performing school over there where 99% of the kids are going to pass the test. So you always look like a good teacher. So we end up with the beginning teachers in the lower-performing schools because they need the job. And then after they've been there a couple of years, they figure out the system. I'm going to get paid more by going to where the kids are more successful, so they leave. So those kids, they keep cycling out. And all of it is because they're attaching all of it to teacher evaluation. And it's really not fair to the teachers. It would be like if you're a salesman and you're told if you don't reach a certain level, then we're not going to keep you with our company anymore. But the territory they give you is a farmland. Well, I don't know where to sell to, you know? I can't stay here, but you're judged on the fact that you didn't sell as much as the guy that has downtown Houston as his territory. Well, duh, I have a bunch of cows to sell to. But it's a whole really weird system, and it's because they sit there and discuss it in a bunch of legislative sessions. They're not talking to the people that are really being affected. They're just using their own logic from when they were in school in 1960. An example of when they talk about teaching to the test, and a lot of people are upset with some of the curriculum that's out there, most of the teachers don't have any say in the curriculum. They have no say in the test that they have to give, and so they have to teach to the test. This was one of the examples of a C-scope question. Mary does not like to make these choices. She likes to be told what's expected of her. She really does not like it when others have more than she has. She thinks everyone should be rewarded equally. People with values like Mary's are happiest living in and maintaining which type of economic system? And of course the answer is communist. You want to know why so many kids graduating nowadays think socialism sounds good? A lot of it is because these are the kind of questions they answered on tests, and the kids who got A's and went on to college, that's the kind of stuff they learned. They didn't learn the damage, they just learned how to get the right answer, and it doesn't sound bad to them at all. When you deal with the Texas legislature, this is my own personal opinion, I would say that the House Public Education Committee is probably the most corrupt committee in the Texas legislature. Some of the chairs that had been there, especially the past chairs, one of them was being paid by an educational entity as a consultant while he was the chair. Well, that entity was quite well protected while he was chair. They become lobbyists, really high-paid lobbyists afterwards. Of course, education lobbyists. Some of them even have family members that have become education lobbyists, or are education lobbyists while they are the chair. I mean, it's like you're sitting there going, oh my God, it's so incestuous. There are no conservatives, or very few conservatives, that they just don't get there. They're not put on education. There's no one there to challenge the establishment. TASA and TASB, the two organizations that are controlled by the superintendents of the school boards, treated like royalty there, and they're considered the authority. I mean, they're the people that are collecting all the money and saying we need more and more bureaucrats, or the people that they're going to for, they're the opinion of the legislature. That's just nuts. The general public is usually treated like a nuisance. It's like, why are you here? You know, you don't represent any organization. Why are you possibly here? Unless you're a big donor. The Senate Education Committee is really different. They actually, and Bill's shaking his head yes, they actually listen to their constituents. They have hearings. They're very respectful to the regular citizens who come and speak. They don't treat you like you're a worthless irritant because you came and spoke when they really just keep watching their clock and want to go home. They actually have some conservatives, and they actually have a conservative who chairs it, which is a real shock. So they're a really good place to stop some of the bad bills that come out of the House. Some other unnecessary things that we have in education, but we should get rid of the federal government. The Ag Commissioner really should have nothing to do with education. If we stop the federal flow of money, that would happen. And of course, in Harris County, we still elect a county school board with no students and pay a property tax to them. And we still have some people who go there and try to clean it up. But it's one of those things only the legislature can get rid of. It's the only school board in Texas elected by a political party. And the legislature did that in the 70s to keep it from letting the local voters shut it down. And so only the legislature can actually get rid of it. The local government is where everybody tries to fix everything, but you can only do in the local government what the state tells you can do. So to be mad at them doesn't really do you a lot of good. They're only doing what the state tells them. They don't really have any choices anymore. And people get mad at teachers joining the unions. Well, that's because they offer insurance and backup for the people who want to sue the teachers all the time. TAS and TASB, and I know Kay Smith has had to go to the Team of 8 training when she was at HCD before. The Team of 8 training you hear about is where the superintendent and the school board go to training together to learn to work as a team so that nobody ever speaks out against the team or else you're bad. So it basically keeps the superintendent totally in charge. And like I said before, everybody's mad at the teachers. And when you look at the whole chart, the teacher has pretty much no say. They're just getting paid and trying to keep up with whatever new laws got passed, and they're just trying to survive and go to the next period. I gave you a list of ways that you could take action. It's on the back of your handout, some things that you could do. It's simple things like getting involved, volunteering, joining the PTO and the PTA, find out what's going on. Get a local voice in your area. You can become an advocate. I became a watchdog for the Harris County Department of Education when I saw the money they were spending. Some things that, found out that your tax dollars treated for the superintendents of Harris County to go to the U.S. Army War College so they could learn how to fight the taxpayers. They also, $1,500, your property tax is paying a donation to the Lone Star College Foundation so the superintendent can have a team at a golf tournament. And the superintendent taking a school board member out. Actually, this guy's running for city council right now. An $82 lunch on the taxpayers. But that's just a normal little daily activity for them. But if you could just get involved in one area, concentrate on it, and make a difference there. Don't try to fix the whole system. You'll go crazy. Just pick one and try to help and support that one area, then you really can be successful.
Okay, that was very good. Covered a lot of territory in a short period of time there. I think we'll wait for the questions overall, and we'll let Linda talk about the homeschooling, and then the two of them can kind of tag team here and answer some questions on that. And I'll give you all opportunity to think through your question so you don't come up with a
Stupid question.
Oh, stupid questions are all right. It's just, we just don't want you to go through 3 paragraphs explaining what you're going to ask. So think about your question. And Linda's going to talk about the...
You gotta sit up here for a second.
Oh,
Take a few questions.
oh, okay. We'll take just one thing I need to mention. I was going to mention it, I'll mention it now. Like you say, we had last year where we tried to go through the education funding, which is even more complex than this, if you can believe that. And then today we're talking about the structure of the state education system and mentioning homeschooling. Now, next month, on December 14th, should be equally good. We're going to have 2 of the state school board members here. And one is Donna, who is not running for re-election. So that should be an interesting discussion. And a lot of the same questions you have in your mind, I'm sure they're going to be able to ask in total. Just to explain how complicated this gets on that while they're setting up, which is a question I'm going to ask in December. Colleen mentioned about how expensive this state testing is. She mentioned $90 million. Well, it's a $500 million contract, $500 million contract over 5 years to do the STAR test. And not every one of our 5 million students takes it. And there's probably 1 to 2 million out of the 5 million that actually takes the test. So it's like $250 per test. Well, last legislative session, Cy-Fair school system, some of us are on the advisory group, helped them. Donna, who's on the school board, she still got it on her webpage. She ran on the idea of doing away with the STARS test and taking a lot of the pressure off the teachers and just letting them go to some nationally recognized alternative. There's the Iowa test of something. I can remember taking that 60 years ago, which is a nationally recognized benchmark of where a student is on various subjects and all. So, a lot of us amassed an effort there with the local, with the Cy-Fair ISD, Doc Alverson, our representative. He had the bill drafted, and since he's on the calendars committee, he's pretty well assured of it. And in this bill, it would have left it to the local community, local school system, with input from the parents, if they wanted to use the STARS test or use one of several other nationally recognized benchmark tests. Well, I've heard 3 stories on it, and I've talked to Alverson on that twice, but the state school board asked him to pull that test, or that bill he had in there. So I think that's, maybe there's good reasons, I don't know. But nevertheless, you had local community wanting to do less and keep more local control, and it got pulled because somebody in Austin, even who was opposed to the wishes and the main theme of the candidacy of Donna, who was president of the school board, said, well, we have to pull that bill. We couldn't bring it to the floor. So that's going to be an interesting question to see. Now, maybe there's good reasons. I'm not condemning anybody, but that should be something we understand. Okay, Linda, would you please tell us about